As we go to air, in fact, the Syrian president, Basha al-Assad, has reportedly fled the country on a private plane amid claims his leadership has been toppled after earlier taking the city of Homs. Syrian rebels now claim to have captured the capital city, Damascus, announcing the fall of the Assad regime after a lightning-fast advance across the country. Professor Greg Barton is an expert in Middle Eastern political affairs. Greg, this seems to have come about very quickly, even though the civil war has dragged on for something like 13 years.
That's right, Hamish. It's like that old line about going bankrupt slowly at first, and all of a sudden it happens. And that's what happened. The opposition had been biding their time, building their strength. And of course, we had this perfect storm with Hezbollah, the main supporter of the Assad regime, on the ground, taken out of action. Russia distracted, Iran in the background, feeling very much like it didn't want to be involved in any more wars. So HTS, the key rebel force, moved in and took advantage of the moment.
Do we know where Assad has gone? The reports are he got on an aeroplane and took off with his family. Where?
We don't know. No, it's a mystery. There were even reports of a plane crash. That remains a mystery. It seems pretty clear, Hamish, that his regime has ended and that he's left the country. Beyond that, we don't know, and perhaps no one really cares too much either.
How have the Syrian rebels managed to pull this off?
Well, HTS, the main group, which was merged out of al-Qaeda and Islamic State, had broken with al-Qaeda in 2016, had said they're becoming more moderate, certainly have behaved in a more moderate fashion. Of course, this is taken with skepticism, but it shows you the choices facing the Syrian people. That do they go with this group, HTS, against Assad? Assad was such a brutal dictator that HTS managed to win their support. And it's not just this group, HTS, that rose up. They came in from the northwest, but groups in the south, groups in Damascus, also fed up with the Assad regime, a really brutal and terrible regime, and also a country suffering from shocking economic circumstances. People, the Assad regime fighters lost the will to fight, and people rose up very bravely. I think they're recognizing they don't have good choices, but this was the best choice they had at the moment.
How significant was the US's help?
The US was significant in the northern third of Syria, beyond the Euphrates River, where the largely Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces helped defeat Islamic State. The US has a very small presence there, about 900 special forces. That stabilizes that region. That's pretty significant. The SDF said that they're prepared to work with HTS and other rebel forces. What we could have is the beginnings of a genuinely multi-ethnic, multi-religious federation. That seems to be the best hope yet, and the US played a small part in stabilising that.
Yeah, so Greg, what does this mean for the stability of the wider region?
Well, if Syria can be rebuilt and stabilised, and there are reasons for being optimistic, that gives more hope for Lebanon, its neighbour. That's good news for Israel, its neighbour. Iraq is still struggling since the troubles of the last 2.5 decades, but it would be better for Iraq too if Syria was stabilised. So this could go either way. It could be the beginning of the unravelling of the region, or it could be the road to some sort of steady climb out of decades of war into a more stable, more accountable series of governments across the region.
Professor Greg Barton, thanks for talking to us tonight. I think, what's always helpful to do when something big like this happens is just to look at the map. So if you think about the powder keg that is the Middle East, right in the middle of it is Syria, right? So this is important to whatever happens next. Now, there are people celebrating the end of the Assad regime. Brutal dictator, killed many tens, if not hundreds of thousands of his people. His dad was a dictator as well. But these new guys may not be any better. Islamists born out of the al-Qaeda movement, involved when ISIS had the caliphate in the north. There's a big mix of different and sometimes rival fighting forces that have now seized control effectively of this country that sits at the epicentre of all of the complexities of that part of the world. So with a bit of optimism, yes, in some quarters, but, the world does need to watch this, because if it goes bad, it'll go really bad.